Are you located?
I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm with Joe right now. Joe, where are you from?
I'm born and raised Los Angeles area. Still live here right now in a little town called Manhattan Beach, if anybody's familiar with the South Bay of Los Angeles.
Oh my gosh, man, I'm jealous. Well, it's cold here today, but Joe DePinto is the founder, co-founder.
Co-founder, there's three other co-founders for
Yeah.
Haste and what is the Haste Arcade.
Oh my gosh, fantastic. Well, I'm already jealous of Joe's hair. Just being real, just being real. But Joe, I'm excited to learn about micro payments, microtransactions, a little bit more about Bitcoin. My audience is kind of beginners. Um, and I just want to thank the audience because we just received this week the recognition. I have no idea how we got it, but we're number 5 on all blockchain podcasts in the world. So I'm like, fantastic.
I actually
So
saw that. I was like,
did
wow,
you
this
see
is
that?
this is gonna be cool. Yeah, congratulations, by the
Oh my gosh, look at that. Hey, all right, all right. So now,
way.
hey, now I know it's real. If Joe saw it, it's got to be real.
It's out there.
Um, so yeah, I just started this thing in December, and kind of like you, I want to hear your backstory. But I heard about blockchain, and it just immediately fascinated me. How did you even get interested into blockchain and crypto and all this stuff?
Isn't it funny how it feels like once someone, learns about blockchain to begin with, it's like this black hole that you literally can't
It's
stop paying
crazy.
attention to it.
It is so true.
And that's kind of how our story came about. So, like I said, I'm Joe, founded Haste with three other co-founders, one of which I had a previous venture. It still operates today. It's called BarPay, and his name's Dan Wagner. Him and I met actually playing professional baseball in the Chicago White Sox minor league system,
What?
and we both, yeah, we've got a
Really?
pretty wild story,
Oh my
but
god.
we would talk about stuff, in the clubhouse, or we were roommates on the road, and just always thought, we didn't really think that we would fit into the corporate mold. We always had ideas and things that we wanted to try in life after
Yes.
baseball and all that. And so in the baseball world, you typically, especially in the minor leagues, will, finish your games at 11 o'clock at night. You got to go out to a local bar or whatever to get dinner after that. And then you got to get back to the hotel within 45 minutes or an hour, or you miss curfew and you get fined, or you don't get to play the next day. And
Wow.
just doing that in a bunch of different towns, we had this concept for, there should be a better way to pay and order for your stuff at busy bars, because it just so happened where, you forget a credit card and you're in Chattanooga, Tennessee one day, you're on the bus the next day going to Birmingham, Alabama, and you don't have your debit card anymore. It's like, okay, now I have no access to money.
Wow.
So we concepted this application called Bar Payout. Dan and I both got released basically the same year, 2014. And in 2015, we took our concept, we took the business plan that we had written out, we raised money, we got it developed, and we launched it in 2016. And it was just a way to order and pay for food and drinks at high volume bars, really was what we were targeting. But in our learning process, we came across this thing called Bitcoin. And the reason that we got interested in it was because through building out bar pay and credit card processing, we learned, this is why credit cards, charge X amount per transaction. This is why an American Express is more expensive to use from a merchant's perspective than a Visa or a debit card compared to a credit card. We learned about all these different rates, and we
Hmm.
have all these bar owners asking us, can you save me on merchant processing, blah, blah, blah. So what we figured was the typical transaction cost is about 2 to 4% in the bar and restaurant industry. So if I spend $10, 2 to 4% of that, the bar owner's losing to the credit card processing fees. Well, we found this thing called Bitcoin where they were alleging that, your transactions can happen basically instantly, as opposed to with typical credit cards, 24 to 48 hours. And the fees are fractions of a cent. So our wheels started spinning like, hey, if we could incorporate this into BarPay, we could have a significant advantage over, a lot of the other merchant processors that are out there.
Hmm.
So at the time, neither of us were technical. Like I said, we had just gotten done playing baseball, so we couldn't really incorporate it into BarPay at the time. But it definitely, was something that was like, okay, we're going to keep our eyes on this. This is a very, very interesting
Yeah.
technology. I think at the time, Bitcoin BTC was around $1,000 maybe. I think Ethereum had just come out. So we were paying attention to this stuff and, quote unquote, investing or buying small amounts of it just to use it, sending it back and forth, seeing if it's something that actually can do what we had read about. And so over the years, we kept our eyes on it. We were involved in 2017 when there was the big ICO boom and bust. I don't know if you ever heard of BitConnect, but one of the greatest Ponzi schemes I think that ever happened. We both lost on that one. But just kind of over the years, seeing the narrative and the utility of the Bitcoin that we had found started to change. It went from this peer-to-peer cash, which if you've ever read, the white paper, you'll see right there in the title, an electronic peer-to-peer cash system, to this, new narrative of digital gold, which we didn't really understand. It was, why are the transactions getting slower? Why are they getting more expensive? It went from something that we could see our business using to something that, the value of it was going up, but we couldn't really figure out why. It was like, This is, it's like the less useful this gets, the higher the price is for it. It was just like, what's going on here? And then you had all these other coins, start popping up and different tokens that were raising $20 million in ICOs just for having like a cool landing page. So I don't know. It was through those experiences that we were just like, man, what's happening with this entire industry? What happened to the original concept, the original protocol? And then in 2017, you had BTC and BCH forked. We were pretty confident that BCH was where the majority of people were going to go because of, the utility. At that point, you had, developers within the Bitcoin community who some thought you need to increase the block size so the transaction fees could stay low and transactions could be fast. You had some who thought, you cap the blocks at 1 megabyte, you introduce SegWit. And that was basically what they were claiming, Satoshi wanted to happen. So,
and here's, can I break this down? Because
sure.
You just dropped a ton of value. I'm tracking, but I know I lost 5 people on the show just about a fork.
Sure.
Explain, and I get it. Explain this whole philosophical little argument, debate that happened within the blockchain community. What is a fork, or Bitcoin? What is a fork? And how is it resolved, and is it resolved today? Can you just give people, just so that they're like, okay, I'm there, I get it.
Yeah, the way you would think about it, and some people call this the Bitcoin Civil War, but a fork would be when you have, let's say you have 100 developers within Bitcoin who are all working on BTC, and half of them say, you know what, we need to make this change to the protocol. The other half say, no, we need to do this. If they can't come to consensus, one of those groups can fork, basically take the chain and implement the new technology that they were wanting to do. At which point, if you have the original chain going this way, you now have a second chain that splits off. So I think it's split a block like 44,000 something. And basically what that means is every single transaction on the blockchain is going to be the same on both chains up to that block where they forked. And from that point on, you have 2 chains. So you have one chain, that's going to continue running the same protocol. And then you have the other chain, which is the new one. What's interesting about that is if you held, let's say, 10 Bitcoins on BTC before the fork, you then got 10 Bitcoin cashes, BCHs, after the fork. So you have your 10 BTC and your 10 BCH, just because the blockchain says, this particular wallet address had this much Bitcoin in it beforehand. So the way to think about it is,
wow.
Yeah, the way to think about it is when a chain forks, it's basically creating a second copy of that chain, that original chain, that has different tech behind it, different protocols based on what those developers thought should happen. And so in this particular example, the Bitcoin Cash fork, the developers that thought that Bitcoin should still function as peer-to-peer cash and did not necessarily agree with the idea of digital gold that Bitcoin had somewhat turned into, or it was expensive to send transactions now. They decided, what, we need to increase the block size, which at a very basic level, that just means you can allow more transactions into every block. So you're not necessarily going to have, as long of waiting times for your particular transaction to get accepted onto a block. and that's what makes it easier to spend like cash. So basically, you had the developers who said we need to, keep this as cash, which forked off into Bitcoin Cash, and then you had the developers who said we want, the digital gold,
The
we want to keep the
purist.
blocks. Sure.
They were like,
So
yeah,
yeah, so that's my best attempt at
that
explaining
was
fork.
awesome. And then
Yeah,
and here's why haste comes in, because you all, just like you said, you and your co-founders, you started to say, hey, here was the original. We could use it as cash, and you wanted to keep that practical utility. And so you work within that blockchain, while the other people were saying, no, we want like this asset class. And it's almost becomes what, elitist. They almost wanted it to be like for a small group of people, and you're saying no, it should be for the masses.
that gets into the conspiracy a little bit, if you will. And this is public information. If you look at the developers that are working on the BTC chain, specifically around when these forks started occurring and when the digital gold narrative popped up, you'll see that a lot of financing came from MasterCard. And if you think about it, why would a credit card company that processes, I think it's $3 trillion a year, why would they, not want a peer-to-peer form of payment to exist in the world? So I'm somewhat of the belief that there were decisions made to purposely take the utility out of Bitcoin so that the current, monetary and financial systems continue to maintain their power. And I think they see the danger in an actual peer-to-peer cash where you don't need a third party to, regulate transactions. And so that's a lot of money at play. But yeah, in terms of
deep, man, I like this. This is good.
Yeah, there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. I'm not gonna bring that stuff up. That goes real deep into the Civil War. But basically, how it related to us and what we ended up doing with Haste was we were fans of the notion of peer-to-peer cash and being able to send this money easily, freely. We thought that's what gave Bitcoin value to begin with. And if you look back, 2012, 2013, 2014, when it actually started increasing in value, the reason, at least in my opinion, was because you had a lot of developers using Bitcoin to pay each other for work. So for example, if I'm a developer in Canada and I'm working with someone in India, it's a lot easier, or it was a lot easier for me to send them Bitcoin for doing a job than for me to send them, a wire. So people were using it to pay for things. And the easier they figured out it was to use, the more valuable it became. So I was always under the notion that the value of this thing is going to come from people using it, not from people being told it's, this digital gold speculative asset. But again, even with us, you had Bitcoin Cash fork from Bitcoin Core BTC, and then even within that Bitcoin Cash community, there was another disagreement. And you hear a lot in the crypto world about this is decentralized, it's outside of government, it's outside of law. I don't necessarily believe that's true. I don't think anything can really operate outside of law. For example, if the US government comes out tomorrow and says, hey, it's illegal to mine in the United States, all those miners, like, they either get shut down or they're going to pay fees or fines or go to jail, whatever. So they're not necessarily operating outside of law. Now, what I do think Satoshi meant when he said things were decentralized, and I think this is misunderstood by a lot of the community, decentralized doesn't mean that every single person runs their own node. Node basically is a way to uphold the blockchain. It's a computer that's just validating transactions. I think what the community thinks is decentralized is that where, me and you are the little guys. We don't have to be a big bank to be able to uphold the ledger. I think that in a world where there's capitalism and there's people that have more money than others, you're always going to have people that are able to acquire more, mining machines, more nodes, and set up massive organizations that are going to be doing this stuff at a level much higher than me and you if we were to go and try and mine. So what I think decentralized meant in terms of what Satoshi was talking about was the actual protocol being locked. So what that means is if you can never change the protocol, if there are developers that don't have the ability to say, hey, we're going to make this implementation or we're going to do that, That, in my opinion, is decentralized. That is what I think Satoshi meant by decentralized. So you had the Bitcoin Cash camp, kind of circling back to all this, who they were still wanting to make, adjustments here or there. They were not very big fans of government or regulation. And then within that camp, you had another group of people who said, like, no, like there does need to be regulation if we want this to have global adoption. And the only way we're going to do that is by actually locking the protocol and making sure that no developer can come in and say, we need to make these changes or this. We need to basically go back to the very original, version 1 of Bitcoin that came out in 2009. That's what they were arguing. And so within the whole Bitcoin Cash camp, you had another hard fork into what is now known as Bitcoin SV. So at this point, you have Bitcoin Core, BTC, which is trading for 40 something thousand dollars right now. You have Bitcoin Cash, BCH, which I think is around, I don't know, $500 or something like that. And then you have Bitcoin SV, which is around $100 right now. So you have these 3 different chains all saying we're the, correct implementation of Bitcoin. The one that we look at and the one that we use for our technology, simply because it is the only chain that can facilitate what we need. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a bit here. But it's Bitcoin SV. And it's because it can still handle hundreds of thousands. I mean, in theory, it can scale to billions of transactions per second. So if you're talking about an actual global payment system, that's a lot. But I've seen in person 50,000 transactions per second at an average cost of like 1/10 of a penny per transaction. And to put that in perspective, and then I'll stop for a sec. Visa Network, and this is stuff we had to learn because of BarPay. Visa Network is the current gold standard for payment processing. Visa Network can handle about 25,000 transactions per second at its peak. And as we discussed earlier, it's going to cost anywhere from 2 to 4% per transaction. BTC, the Bitcoin that's trading at 40 something thousand dollars, can do up to 7 transactions per second with an average cost that's going to fluctuate between $1 and it's been as high as $50. So that's never going to be used for an actual global payment mechanism. BCH, Bitcoin Cash, can do about 120 transactions per second at a cost of about a penny per transaction. So not bad on the cost, but in terms of the total volume, not going to be able to scale to global adoption. Ethereum can do roughly 15 transactions per second at a cost of around, I think it's like $29 right now. So again, I'm not going to be able to go buy a $5 cup of coffee and pay $30 in fees to get that coffee. BSV, Bitcoin SV, like I said, I've seen 50,000 transactions per second, less than 1/10 of a penny per transaction. That to me seems like the technology that has the ability to scale in the long run. So I'll stop there for a second. I know that's probably a lot.
No, I'm tracking. So right now, it can do double Visa speed at a fraction of a penny, not 2.9%. So I mean, I want people to realize this because, on some of my shows, I've gotten a little bit of heat from some of my longtime clients because they're authors. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I have several, and I might as well show you. The square, right? I know most authors have a square. Who knows? Maybe it's at my house. I think I have it. They have a square where they plug it into their phone, and here it is. And I got a bunch of these, right? So they got these, and they plug into the phone, and that now they can sell their book.
Yep.
And they can sell their book, and now they are the bank, they are the store, they are the bookstore. But like you just said, I sell $100 worth of books, and anywhere from $3 to $4 is gone.
Yep.
So
that's the current mechanism.
Why this is relevant.
Yep. That's why this is relevant. Yep. What's interesting about that too, Square, founded by Jack Dorsey. I don't know if you're familiar with this COPA lawsuit, but there's basically a group. It's like Jack Dorsey, I think Facebook or Meta or whatever they're calling themselves these days is part of it. There's a couple major players who are all basically there's an upcoming lawsuit against a gentleman who claims to be Satoshi, who also happens to be a proponent of Bitcoin SV. And in essence, they're saying, you're not Satoshi. You have to stop saying that you are. But Square, if you think about it, like why would they be pushing for BTC to be, the dominant chain? No one's going to use BTC to actually pay for, a $50 book if it costs $12 in transaction fees. So
Sure.
Square keeps making their 2.75% off every swipe. So again, that gets a little bit into the conspiracy. I'm going to try to avoid that stuff,
Wow.
but there's some
Okay.
deeper things, some deeper
So
reasons.
couple quick questions about this. We'll go longer too, because this is good stuff. A couple questions. One is, does forking happen as much as we think? Meaning, I know we brought it up like, hey, it's happened 3 times in Ethereum. I think it's happened, I don't know, maybe once, the big one or whatever. But it's not like it's happening all the time.
No, and I don't think you'll see many more forks, especially from like the major Bitcoin chains. I think you have basically the 3 schools of thought there, that the communities that are within each one of those feel extremely confident that their vision is the correct one. And I'm not one of those people that thinks at the end there will only be one chain for any reasons other than economical reasons.
Competitors, you don't want a monopoly.
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be people who are trying to, come up with their own chain that maybe it does do something better than one of these other chains. And I think, unfortunately, within the entire crypto community, instead of all the chains focusing on how can we make this entire, ecosystem grow, there's a lot of, competition and division where it's like, oh, your chain's terrible, your chain doesn't work as well as ours, blah, blah, blah. Instead of just being like, why does it matter what chain is this one or that one? If there's people using it for a specific reason, why isn't that good enough?
Yeah. So, okay. So I love this. So I did not know. This just goes to show. And again, I take on the position of the learner here in this podcast. I knew there was 2, but I did not know about the third. And tell me again, I know
Yeah.
BTC or BT Cash.
Yep.
Give us that one more time.
So you have BTC, which is Bitcoin as most people think of it, the $40,000 one. You have BCH, which is Bitcoin Cash, which was the first fork, and then you have Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, or Bitcoin SV, BSV for short. BSV. And the reason I don't think a lot of people do know about BSV outside of the crypto community, within the crypto community, it does kind of have, I don't want to call it a black eye, but there's a lot of other chains that are not fans of BSV for one major reason. And I think it's the gentleman who has claimed to be Satoshi multiple times. His name's Craig Wright. Whether he is or he isn't, that's kind of irrelevant to me. We use this particular chain because it's the only one that can facilitate what we do for the arcade, and I'll explain that in a second. But in essence, this particular chain, BSV, and because of this gentleman, Craig Wright, it's been delisted from a lot of major exchanges. It's been, attacked on Twitter by a lot of the original BTC, fans or whatever you want to call them. So most of the time when people go and look it up, the first thing they'll see is, oh, Craig Wright's a liar, he's not Satoshi, or, oh, BSV is a scam, it's a fraud. And it was hard for us to, we knew that going into what we were creating, and we're just like, look, these things that they're saying might be true, but from our perspective, this technology is the only thing that allows us to do what we need to do. And here's exactly the example that I'll give. If you were to go to an arcade and put a quarter in a Pac-Man machine, okay, and say you get on a leaderboard. Well, what we were able to figure out was, we know that micropayments were possible, with the original Bitcoin protocol. And by a micropayment, I mean anything less than $1. In our example, we're going to say less than a penny. Okay, so we could take a quarter and split it 100 ways. You can actually split it even more than that, because BSV, they've lowered what's called the dust level, which that's just the smallest amount of Bitcoin that you can send in a transaction for the miner fees, which is complicated. But basically, we said, okay, we're going to take this quarter and we're going to split it 100 different ways and send it to 100 of our friends. So each one of our friends is going to get, 0.2 tenths of a cent. And that is Bitcoin, in our opinion. That was part of the original concept. Yeah. So it was like, all right, we programmed a way to do this. Now, what's going to be the trigger? What's going to be the action that sends, these fractions of a cent to all of our friends? And we just came up with this really simple little game where you tap your, start on your phone, the screen goes blank, and then within 2 to 3 seconds, a little dot, like this dot that I have on my shirt, would just show up somewhere on the screen. And the whole point was just tap the dot as fast as you can. So I would tap it in, 427 milliseconds. And I would, that time would go somewhere on a leaderboard. So then here comes Kary, you go in, you tap it, your score is 412 milliseconds, so you're higher than me on the leaderboard. Well, anyone that's on that leaderboard is going to get a fraction of that quarter, because it costs, we didn't charge a quarter to play, we charged a penny at the very first level, but it costs a penny every time you want to play. So when I hit play, that penny is sent, and this all happens instantly because of the original Bitcoin protocol. That penny gets sent and it gets split to whoever's already on that leaderboard. So back to my arcade reference, you put your quarter into the Pac-Man machine, say you get the highest score, you're number one on the leaderboard. Well, every time someone plays on that Pac-Man machine after you, you are going to get a percentage of the quarter that they spend on that machine. So you being in the number one spot, let's say you make 10% of every quarter after that, so 2.5 cents. At one Pac-Man machine, that might not be a whole lot of money, but on a digital arcade where you have hundreds of thousands or millions of people playing, those little fractions of a cent really add up. And that was, in our opinion, one of the most exciting things about what you can do with original protocol Bitcoin is you can have new business models that can generate, significant amounts of money. Another example I'll give, this is something that we're playing with right now, would be like an hourly, we've all had monthly subscriptions where you pay $14.99 for Netflix or whatever. I don't watch a whole lot of shows, like paying $14.99, like it's just, I don't do it. However, if I could pay, a penny per hour while I'm watching the shows in the form of an hourly subscription, that's something that I would be much more in tune to. Now I'm only paying for what I'm actually using. And as an actual content creator, I don't need this third party anymore, Netflix, to monetize for me. I can go directly to the customer.
Hang on right there, because again, I'm gonna break this down so people realize this. Musicians massively shifted when you could buy the song instead of the album. So I want people to realize, okay, what he's talking about, Joe, is not that crazy. We just went through less than 20 years ago. Hey, I gotta spend $15 and I only really want one song. So iTunes comes along and now you buy per song. Amazon has actually implemented a process where the author gets paid per pages read. Yep. I don't know if did you know that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that specific example, but you're absolutely right. Exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, so now keep rolling. I just wanted people to realize, yeah, this is relevant with our current system. This isn't theory. Okay.
Yeah. So another thing to think about, and again, this is why I think microtransactions are so important to the future, is that, up until blockchain and Bitcoin, let's say I'm a digital artist and I make sneakers that people can wear in a video game.
Right.
Well, up until blockchain, you couldn't sell digital art for less than a certain amount because of those credit card fees. Whereas now I can sell a 5-cent good digitally. You go and try and Google right now, where can I buy something for a nickel on the internet? Literally impossible until blockchain. And that's why I think, you have these other chains like Ethereum or BTC who are talking about this digital gold narrative. You can't spend 5 cents there without paying massive fees.
Oh yeah.
BSV, it enables these new business models and these new, types of subscriptions, like what you were saying, you pay per page you read. That's a beautiful example. That's exactly how things should go. Like I do this all the time. My dad will send me, New York Times articles, and I'm not a subscriber there. So I'll scroll and I'll read one paragraph, and then it's like, hey, to continue, $9.99. It's just like,
exactly.
Why can't I just read and pay as I go? And it's because up until, like I said, blockchain, like those payment rails just weren't possible.
Interesting. All right, I want one more analogy here, and then you keep rolling. But I want people to realize that on MetaMask, okay, so it's going to load here in a second, right?
Yep.
I'll press my little button. There's a little MetaMask thingy. And again, you got to translate for me. But I have, in MetaMask, I have an NFT that is my book.
Yep.
So I literally have created an NFT of my book. So again, I want people to realize, like, okay, we're talking about real things here.
Yep.
And that cost me a lot of money because I minted it on Ethereum.
Yep.
And this was a year ago, and I just was trying to be, cutting edge and blah blah blah. But that was not practical to mint a book or a book cover on Ethereum, where I forget, gas fees were crazy last year, but it
Yep.
was like $150 or something.
Yep.
But you're telling me that I could do that with the BSV for what?
Yeah. So to mint NFTs on BSV, you're talking about pennies or less, regardless. And that's another aspect where, the reason Ethereum even became a thing. Are you familiar with the name Vitalik
Oh yeah,
Buterin?
yeah.
Okay. So he originally was developing one of the, Bitcoin developers, and he was a big fan of the idea of, at the time, what was called colored coins. Colored coins became known as tokens now on Ethereum, but he, had disagreements with a lot of the people in the Bitcoin development community at the time, who were saying, like, no, these will just be spam. We don't want to incorporate this. This is not part of Bitcoin. He was like, fine, well, I'm going to go and build my own chain where you can do this. And so, he creates Ethereum. He gives people the ability to create tokens and NFTs, which is, I thought it was fantastic, number one, to actually prove that there are use cases for that. But I think that's why Ethereum became known as like the de facto platform for tokens, NFTs, and whatnot. And that was what Vitalik wanted. Um, what's really interesting, though, is that original Bitcoin, the original protocol, back in 2009, it actually could incorporate NFTs. And this is something, again, that the community is not really aware of. And this is, if you go down, the rabbit holes in the history of Bitcoin, and you learn more about who Craig Wright is, the guy that claims to be Satoshi. He was saying back in 2014, before anybody knew who he was, he called into this one conference that had a bunch of the leaders of Bitcoin at the time, and was basically saying, like, hey, Bitcoin is what's called Turing complete, meaning that it can do smart contracts, it can do tokens and NFTs. And the Bitcoin developers were like, no, it can't. Like, well, we've never heard that before. What are you talking about? And basically, if you look back at the original code that Bitcoin is written in, it's a very elegant code. It's a very, like, older language. So the way that I would, make an analogy would be, if you were to read, a book from the 1500s. Yeah, it's like the, blah, blah, blah of twas the,
Yeah.
So, if we were reading that nowadays, it might seem a little bit foreign to us. Well, apparently in the original Bitcoin code, there was a section that was this colored coins notion that the developers who ended up taking over the project from Satoshi, when Satoshi kind of stepped away in 2010 or 2011, whenever it was, they were reading through the code. And they literally, like, just didn't know what it meant. So they just kind of, like, slashed it out, making it, not part of what then became BTC. And so you have this guy Craig saying, like, no, you can do these tokens on it. Fast forward to 2018, you have the Bitcoin SV fork from Bitcoin Cash, and all of a sudden, they go back and maintain the original protocol, and now all of a sudden people are minting tokens and NFTs on Bitcoin SV for fractions of a cent. For example, we've done several NFT collections for Haste, where it cost us, I think, 2 cents to mint some like 24 NFTs that we ended up selling.
Wow.
And so you can do all these things. And that's why, I think what ended up happening with Ethereum is a lot of people made a lot of money when, Ethereum first launched, and it's obviously, increased in value tremendously. So what do you do once you have that money? People use it for clout. They can go and afford to buy or mint, a $10,000 NFT. But that's, like you were saying earlier, that's a very small percentage of the population. The majority of us, if we weren't the early adopters of Ethereum, we don't have, the bags that a lot of these other people did. So we don't have the ability to pay, hundreds of dollars to mint a simple NFT. If you're a celebrity, yeah, it's nothing to you. But for the average person, and that's the other thing, an NFT doesn't have to be some incredible piece of art. An NFT is literally just a non-fungible token. It's a digital proof of an asset. So, like, a ticket to a concert or something, that could be an NFT. You can sell NFTs for that instead of just selling the tickets. So there's a whole lot of applications for NFTs and tokens that I think people are going to start seeing more and more over the next couple of years. I think obviously the digital art space was a great groundbreaking place for it. But I also kind of laugh when I see people buying, digital rocks for $1.5 million. I don't understand that necessarily, but
that's right.
I think people see more and more of this stuff with utility over the next couple of years.
So we'll go another 5 minutes, and then I got to talk to you offline about something really, really cool here.
Sure.
But give us the okay, now my audience, at least I'm like, dang, Joe knows so much. Like really, oh my gosh, you expanded my mind. So what if we're leaning in and we're like, oh man, I see what he's saying about BTC. It's kind of like digital gold, but it's for the elite, just because of the cost to even get in, even if you can buy a fraction. And then we see the Bitcoin Cash, and now we see the utility of the BSV. What can we do to grow more knowledge with you, investment? Like, what do you offer? I don't even know what Haste like offers. What do I start tapping a dot on my phone? What do I do?
Yeah, we're just an arcade where you can come and, like I said, you can spend anywhere from a fraction of a cent all the way up to, a full BSV, which is like $100 at this point, to play simple arcade games. And if you're a gamer and you enjoy gaming, maybe you're a casual gamer, now you have the chance to actually monetize some of your gameplay. So it's the whole like play to earn notion.
Play to earn, yeah.
Yeah, which is obviously a big thing. But I think one thing important about us is that we're skill-based games. So a lot of play to earn right now is, you can go and buy upgrades for your character that give you an advantage over someone else, where I might not be as skilled as you at the game, but because I have more money, I can go and get, all the cool gear, and my player is gonna outperform yours. But in terms of, what we're doing at Haste, BSV, you can get it through an app called Hand Cash, which my username I think is Joey D. If you want to give me a shout out there, but yeah, you can get Hand Cash. You can purchase BSV directly within it. It's a very clean wallet. There's another great wallet called Relay X where you can go and mint your own tokens or your own NFTs. That's actually what we use. And like I said, it's going to be fractions of a cent. And it's really just making people aware of, if you're one of those people, and I get this all the time from my friends who are just like, Joe, I don't get it. Like, why is this thing worth so much? Like, I don't get it. I'm like, trust me, I don't really get it either. Like, if you can't use it for anything, I don't see the total value that they're, claiming that it has. What I can explain to you and what I do think you'll get is that if you've heard blockchain is going to change the world, I think examples like what Haste is doing with micropayments. I think examples, there's another game called Duro Dogs, what they're doing with NFTs. They're selling NFTs for 99 cents a piece. And it's this, provably unique digital dog that you can train, you can pet, you can dig and find other things. Like, those are real world use cases, I think, that anyone can get involved with, because the fees, like I said, and the costs are so low. You don't have to be one of these early adopters.
Yeah.
And that's just what I think we're trying to do in general, is show people, who don't want to go down the rabbit holes and learn all this stuff, like, hey, here's a really straightforward use case for blockchain technology. You put a quarter in a machine, you get on a leaderboard, you earn small payments from everyone else that plays after you. There's not much you have to understand about that. People already know arcade games. People can, I think, grasp the concept of, making a penny every couple seconds or something like that. So that would be, my closing pitch, I guess, on using blockchain for actual utility.
Wow. Any other bridges that you can connect for authors or creators? I know we kind of stopped and said, okay, hold on, authors, is there any other thing, even in the future of your vision with Haste, that you can see, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think the hourly subscription is something that I'm personally really interested in, and then loyalty tokens, like a rewards program, would be the other one. And that is actually something that we're working on, are both of those concepts. But like, if you're an author, for example, you could charge upfront for the NFT to that book. I think that's probably the smartest way to do it. But let's say you're like a blog, writer or something, and you're putting out content a little bit more frequently. That's where I think an hourly or a daily subscription would probably, be a really cool way to try monetize. And, when you can charge a penny per hour, it's 24 cents a day. Like, that's really not something people are going to notice.
Yeah.
The other aspect would be, like I said, the loyalty tokens and loyalty rewards programs. I was just in Las Vegas this past week for a bar and restaurant expo, actually. But I spoke on a panel there to a bunch of casino owners about how they could implement blockchain. And they were kind of asking the same questions. It's like, we don't really get it. Like, what's the point? I was like, okay, right now, all these casinos have, their player cards, right? If you're a frequent, person at the Caesar's Palace, you get your player card, you get points every time you gamble. Well, you can only use those points within the Caesar ecosystem, though. And what if there's a really cool show over at the MGM Grand that you have, 100,000 Caesar's points to, but they're no good at MGM? Well, instead of having, those segmented point systems, I think if places were to start utilizing tokens as loyalty programs, now me as the consumer, yeah, I still love Caesars. I go to Caesars. I'm earning Caesars tokens now, but I can all of a sudden exchange these Caesars tokens on, an exchange for either cash that I can go and buy this MGM, pass for, or if MGM has their own token, I could exchange it directly for that. So what you're going to see as businesses now is the actual companies that have the most value, their tokens are going to be the ones that, people want the most. And so people are going to be exchanging Caesars for MGM, MGM for, the Win, depending on what services you can use those tokens at, per different casino. So like I said, I'm really excited about the idea of hourly subscriptions because of the micropayments. And then I'm really excited about the idea of loyalty programs that are utilizing tokens, because I think it opens up, where you can redeem loyalty points to a whole bigger audience.
Yep. So it's in metaverse words, it's the interoperability of the token and the coin, that we can go outside of the metaverse of Caesar and now into the metaverse of MGM.
Yep.
Just like your NFT and your avatar can travel with you, your loyalty points can. That's interesting, man. This was awesome. Where can people find out more about you?
Just hastearcade.com. Our website is nice. It'll explain, a lot about what I've talked about. If you do want to read that stuff, if you don't, if you just want to play games and earn, for making a leaderboard, you can do that as well. The onboarding is pretty simple. Like I said, Hand Cash is the name of the app. I'm Joey D, if you want to give me a shout out there. And yeah, we're pretty active on Discord also. Like, if you have questions, if you're a game developer, I guess that's one thing I didn't hit on, was we built a software developer kit. So our hope is that, we're not necessarily a gaming studio. We do put out games that are decent quality, but they're not going to be, like Call of Duty or FIFA or anything like that. But if you are a game developer and you like the idea of what we call instant leaderboard payouts, that's the whole notion of our payout system. If you think that's something that your gamers would enjoy, we have a software developer kit that basically will allow you to plug that instant leaderboard payout structure into your games. And the game developers, obviously, they get one of those, fractions that gets sent out from every gameplay. So it's an additional money, or monetary revenue stream for the game developer. So,
dude, you blew my mind today. I'm so glad. I don't even know how we found each other, but I'm so glad you came on. And hastearcade.com, folks, check it out. And hopefully you learned a ton just like me. Thanks for being here today.
Really appreciate you having me. Thank you, Kary.